World stock markets woke up to an uncertain day today. Joe Biden's withdrawal from the race for the White House raises the question for investors as to whether his likely replacement, current Vice President Kamala Harris, has more or less of a chance against Donald Trump than the incumbent president. Prediction platforms such as PredictIt, which allow you to bet on the outcome of the presidential race like trading on the stock market, have recorded an increase in Harris's chances from some 23 to 40% since yesterday. At the same time, bettors support such an outlook with their own money. That is why we are also talking about prediction markets, so it can have a higher relevance than simple public opinion polls. Trump's chances for the White House fell slightly to 60% following Biden's withdrawal. Let us recall that in the first half of last week, shortly after the failed assassination attempt, they amounted to 70%. The fact that Harris's chances are increasing does not only reflect the fact that after Biden's withdrawal, she is the clear favorite of the Democratic Party to win the nomination, but in part also the fact that, according to bettors and investors on the outcome of the election, according to the prediction markets, she has a slight advantage over Trump, more chances than Biden. Of course, this is just a momentary mood, but if Harris were to step into her campaign now on the right foot and really sharp, she has a chance to take more and more percentages from Trump. At the same time, there is one indisputable dividend on Harris's side already. Age. Americans have a clear tendency to vote for younger candidates in elections. Harris was not yet 60, while Trump is in his 80s. At the same time, the race for the White House, in which the age difference between the candidates exceeded 10 years, ended in the triumph of the younger, Democratic candidate in recent decades. In 1992, Bill Clinton defeated George Bush Sr., who was a dozen years older. 4 years later, he managed even 23 years older Bob Dole. In 2008, Barack Obama triumphed over John McCain, who was a quarter of a century older, and in 2012 he defeated Mitt Romney, who was 14 years older. At least on paper, Harris may actually have a better chance than Biden. Therefore, investors are now gripped by uncertainty, because while they know the worldview of Trump and Biden well, including how they translated it or are translating it into practice in the role of the planet's sickest politician, Harris is largely unknown to them. She is not so visible in the role of Biden's vice president. However, she overshot her priorities during her own presidential campaign in 2019 to 2020. Before she withdrew from the race then, she supported Biden, became his campaign partner, and eventually vice president. Like maybe President Harris was promising things that make Biden an old-school moderate centrist, although he is also very wasteful. And although under Biden's presidency the United States shows unsustainably high budget deficits and a significant increase in debt, although they are relatively solidly growing economies compared to the economies of EU countries or even China, a significant part of this growth is bought with huge debt. Its already high rate of growth would likely increase dramatically under a potential Harris administration. One example for all. In her aforementioned presidential campaign, Harris promised to implement a gigantic climate plan that would cost American taxpayers $10 trillion, i.e., some 232 trillion crowns. At current prices, the Czech economy will generate such a sum of money in about 33 years. Biden pushed through a green plan roughly 6 to 7 times smaller than Harris's would have been. At the same time, this Biden package is still the largest fiscal stimulus in the entire history of the USA, and certainly contributed significantly in recent years to the spinning of extraordinary inflation there, the highest in several decades. Harris would thus be not only the first woman in the White House, but also a dark-skinned one. She would be the first person in the entire history of the United States to introduce true socialism from the White House. Harris is not only much more socialist than Biden, but also more progressive and greener. Unlike Biden, Harris would ban fracking, i.e. the extraction of oil or natural gas by the environmentally controversial method of hydraulic fracturing. The politician also promotes the American Green New Deal, i.e., the American equivalent of the Green Deal, while Biden refused to support it in its entirety. Harris is also much more receptive than Biden to broad student debt forgiveness, a key plank of progressive agendas. Biden objects to why the debt should be forgiven even to well-earning graduates of the most prestigious American universities. Higher education in the USA is dramatically more successful than the European one, which is based far less on market principles and much more on demandingness. Soaring, but realistically speaking, American higher education has been moving human civilization forward in recent decades much more fundamentally than the entitled European one. If Harris succeeds in pushing the elements of pretentiousness into American higher education, it may further fatally damage the economic competitiveness and ultimately the military and security resilience of the entire West, especially in the face of China. In terms of international trade, however, Harris is in some ways even closer to Trump than to Biden. So she is not only a socialist, but also a protectionist socialist. It is precisely in protectionism that he is quite on par with Trump. In 2016, for example, it opposed the Trans-Pacific Partnership, i.e., a large free trade zone between the United States and a number of Asian, but not China, but also Latin American economies, plus Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The convention was negotiated by the administration of Barack Obama, with the support of then Vice President Biden, but Trump threw it off the table after taking office. Overall, Harris calls for more far-reaching regulation than Biden, including in the area of artificial intelligence, for example. The United States is now determining world development in this area precisely because it is not as over-regulated as, for example, the entire IT sphere and the economy of the European Union in general. Again, if Harris were to handcuff the IT sphere and artificial intelligence in the U.S. along the lines of the European Union, which practically has no truly global technology companies, the entire West is in danger of falling behind Asia, especially China. This lagging behind could be as significant as the EU is now showing, which is looking at the back of both the United States and China from an ever-increasing distance in the field of new technologies.